Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Savor Food and Body. Today, I have Gabi Kahn with me. She is a registered dietitian and specializes in working with moms that have young kids and helping them all have a healthy relationship with food and body. So I'm so excited for our conversation today. I think it's going to really provide you all some really great nuggets. So Gabi, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. And if you'd like to tell a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So, as you said, I'm Gabby. I work with moms with young daughters who really have struggled with just food and dieting and negative body image and refuse to let their kids struggle the way they have or they do right now. I have my master's and my undergrad from NYU, and I'm the owner of Method Nutrition, and I absolutely love everything that I do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And NYU, did you study under Marion Nestle?
She was one of the professors there. I did not have the honor of being in one of her classes, though.
Oh my gosh, like that's us all I think about when I think of NYU. I'm like, oh, that's where Marion Nestle lives.
Oh yeah, I saw her a few times and I totally fangirled.
Those of you that aren't familiar with Marion Nestle, she's kind of the female version of Michael Pollan. So she does a lot of work around environmental aspects of food and nutrition, and she's been doing a way long time. So she's kind of the go-to guru in that regard. So if you're interested in that type of nutrition, definitely check out Marion Nestle. So let's dive into this. Like, Gabby, how did you start to become interested in like this niche part of nutrition and dietetics? And I'm wondering if that ties to your own personal experience with your mom and food and body.
Yeah, so the reason I really got into this area of working with moms and daughters in the vicious diet cycle is because this is what I grew up in. I grew up in a family where all the mothers dieted and all the daughters dieted, and it was just this constant cycle. I've watched my grandmother diet, I watched my mom diet. I ended up dieting at the age of 10. I went to the pediatrician, and I remember this vividly as they told me I had gained way too much weight in 1 year and I had to lose it all before my menstrual cycle because the fear was back then that once you get your menstrual cycle, you're at the weight you're at now, and all you do is gain weight. And it instilled this fear. And at that point, I was sent to see a nutritionist because my mom did that out of love and caring for me. She thought that was the right move. She wanted to protect her daughter. And at the age of 10, I was calorie counting. I knew how to measure and portion out my food, and I couldn't go out to eat anywhere. I vividly remember at the graduation, so I think this was around fourth or fifth grade, everyone was running for a slice of cake, the pizza, and I was sitting there with my green little lunch sack with like a clementine and my healthy food and just missing out on so many key events. I even had friends come over to me saying they understand how hard it is. Their mothers do this too. They can't eat the regular food or the kid food. And it just started at this age where I was just constantly dieting, critiquing my body. And by the time I was about 15 or 16 years old, I have a little sister. We have a double digit age gap. And so she was about 4 at that time. And I watched her stand in front of the mirror. She grabbed her stomach and said, "Gabby, I'm fat." And it was at that moment where I literally saw that cycle continue. When you have that big of an age gap, you're half like a sister and you're half like a mother. And it was at that moment that I was like, things have to change around here. This little girl is not growing up hating her body and thinking that she's on diets. And she's 4 years old and already doing exactly what I do.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, Gabby, there is so much in that one, my heart just breaks for you. And two, I mean, this is why I do the work that I do too. I'm focusing more on middle-aged women, but just to stop that diet cycle, just to stop, because many of my clients have been through a similar experience. And kind of the whole why behind what we do is stop. If we stopped that cycle, think of what that would do to the incidences of eating disorders in this country. Like there wouldn't be any. There
It
wouldn't be
would
any if
transform it.
yeah, absolutely. So, to focusing, like you say, on the moms or anybody that's of mom age or middle age, like if you think about like you saw your grandmother, you saw your mom going through, the routines of counting and body shaming and all of that. And so any adult women if we can help them heal a relationship with food and body, it's just going to have a ripple effect down to any, whether they have kids or not. I mean, you focus on the ones that have kids, but even if they're a teacher, like adults in school systems and what they're teaching about health and nutrition, I mean, they're molding young minds too around what's okay for food and body also. And so I think that when I first learned about your work, that's one of the reasons that I was so key to do this interview, because I'm like, we have a similar passion of like, this cycle has to stop. This generational body punishment has to stop.
It's really so bad, and as you're saying too, like, it isn't necessarily the mother. For example, I work with a grandmother now, and she has older kids, but she wants to be the positive role model for her grandkids, but it's the environment. So how if it's your home environment, if you're a parent, if it's the school environment, if you're a teacher, it's any environment where you're influencing kids, how can you be that positive example? And it's never too late to work on that. You can just changing yourself at any age just shows how powerful that is. And it shows your kids or your grandkids or whoever you influence out in the world, maybe you don't even realize it, that they have the opportunity to change their relationship with food in their body too.
100%. Yes. And just the cyclical nature of that, in that, empowering those women to say, hey, it stops with you. You can, like you said, at any time you can stop the torture that you went through. You can stop it for generations to come. And I think that that's just so empowering for those individuals. So going back to your experience, then how did that when that well, let me ask you this. When did the light bulb go off for you in your experience? You mentioned your sister, but how did your experience with dieting and body pinching, how did that end up unfolding to where you are today?
So I the craziest part about this is that so that moment when I kind of saw my sister mimicking it was the moment where I changed my habits, but they weren't necessarily non-diet health promoting habits. It became that obsession with health. The over exercising, eating as clean and as healthy as you can and having all these food rules because that's what I thought was healthy. If I'm not dieting, I thought, it is in a sense it is dieting. You're on another diet. It's a clean eating diet. It's more set of rules. And it was probably the most unhealthy point of my life. And it was a few years later after that, kind of going into the college time, that I realized that all of this isn't healthy. What is that healthy relationship with food? If you're stressing over food, if you're thinking about food 24/7, if you're constantly, every time you see a reflection or every time you get ready, you're having this battle with your body, then it's a sign that you need help and that you have to transform this. So I went through my own transformation with intuitive eating and learning how to regain trust with my body. And what if it's at a different weight than I want it to be? And really evolving around food as well. And that's kind of what started this idea of I need to go into nutrition and I can't let another person suffer the way I have. I refuse to let myself continue to suffer. I'm worthy of more. And so are so many other people.
Yes. Yeah, so really then it shifted from maybe the behaviors that you were being taught through your mom or that modeling, but it sounds like it almost shifted towards more of an orthorexic mindset around it, or the fear of eating anything unhealthy or being unhealthy. And so even if the your behaviors shifted a bit, but your mindset was still, like you said, still in kind of a diet mentality.
Yeah, absolutely. Back then, orthorexia wasn't even really a word. We didn't know what that was. And it's 100% what it was, because that's also what I saw in the home. I saw my mother, step on a scale, see a number, get really upset. They don't even know what that number was, step off the scale, and then change her habits for the day. I watched her obsess over every new diet or every new health food craze. And when you're around that all the time, you start to think that's normal. And it's really, as you said, it's these orthorexic behaviors because that's also what the wellness industry idolizes. So you let go of dieting now and instead you become obsessed with health and you think that's healthy, but really all you're doing is continuing to damage your relationship with food in your body.
Yes, 100%. And how often we're fed, especially these days, we're fed that party line of wellness is like wellness and health are married together. Oh, and your body needs to be this certain size in order to have health and wellness, or needs to be doing these certain behaviors with food or movement to have health and wellness.
Yeah, it's really this craze. And I also think the social media industry has made this 10 times worse because now we're getting advice from people who aren't in this field. And we're also seeing it being promoted on a daily basis. I always say, I think to some of those like very famous and very influential mom bloggers. And if you actually look at what they're doing on a daily basis for themselves and for their kids, it's these very orthorexic, obsessed with health behaviors. And I know that they're doing it to protect themselves and their kids because that's what they think is best. I mean, there's no mom manual. Nobody knows what to do when you become a mom. You're learning as you go. But a lot of these behaviors that they kind of push out there and people want to be like, or that's their goal, they're really these unhealthy behaviors.
Absolutely. And that we can, anybody that doesn't have a degree in nutrition or in mental health can just hop on any of the social media platforms and just, go at it with their personal experience. But as trained professionals, we both know, even if our personal experience inspired us to get into the work that we do, but we also understood the importance of going and getting the professional education, sitting for our boards, getting our license, things like that, that make us truly the authority to blend what does the science say about health and wellness and health at every size and intuitive eating, and blend that with our own experience, which maybe that's the more emotional piece of it. So in a way we can offer that balance to our clients, and the empathy of like, oh, I know what you're going through, I've been there, and this is what I know, this is what the science tells us on how I can help you get out of that and moved past this place that you're in right now.
Yeah, I think you say it so well too. It's like the emotional aspect of our story, but we're actually using education and science to help our clients. I say that if you ever look at the person who's saying that they can help you based on what they did for themselves, that is the first red flag you see because one size doesn't fit all. There isn't one method to helping people, and you really want to work with somebody who can work towards your individual needs without making it about what works for them.
Yes, 100%. And one of the things that popped into my mind as you were talking about this with your mom, your aunt, your grandmother, one of the things that comes up for a lot of my clients is when they're want to make the switch to not dieting anymore. They say, well, how am I going to bond with those people? How am I going to bond with the other women in my life if we're not hashing about what we're eating, what we're not eating, pinching ourselves, like degrading, going shopping, and we're, having the rough conversation, or like, oh, I need another size or whatever. Like, so how did that play out in your life in terms of when you decided to make that switch of going, I'm not doing this anymore? How did that affect those kind of social relationships with the other women in your family?
So I think with the women in my family was different than the woman who I was friends with. So with the women in my family, they knew what I was doing for what was best for me. And I would still say that my mother is someone who still diets and who obsesses over weight in her body. And that's okay because she's not ready to make the change and I can't fix her. So she'll still bring up those really uncomfortable conversations. But what I've had to learn how to do is how I change my mindset around it and interact with those conversations. A lot of times I've learned how to bring in like facts or explain how the comments people make can be more detrimental. But I do find a lot of times it is challenging to bond with family members or to have these conversations if you don't want to talk about somebody else's body weight or diet plan. What I think is really important is you have to think about your own mental health. So, what works best for me right now? Maybe you're at a family event where your mom or your family is going on about this new diet they're going to start and it makes you feel uncomfortable. You have permission to leave the room. What I also think is kind of special about learning about yourself in this whole new area is sometimes you might notice that it's time to get new friends. You can't change your family, and that's okay. You'll learn how to work with it, but maybe you need a new friend group. I always say with my clients, we kind of call it like, do you remember the TV show The Biggest Loser? The
Hmm.
Biggest Loser friend group. In your chat, you're probably talking about the new weight loss diet, you're sending pictures, everybody's, that's a topic of conversation. And when you go down this path of changing your mindset and your relationship with food and your body, you notice that some friendships or even family relationships are just specifically focused on weight in your body. And it might be time to kind of cleanse your social media feed of these friends. If you can't get rid of them, you can mute them. And maybe it's time to find people who you can really connect with and support you on this journey the way you need to be supported. I think it's really kind of important, as you were saying, that it's time to build these friendships and relationships with people who support your actions and don't continue to make you feel uncomfortable in your body or with your choices.
Yes, and finding that community is so important because let's be honest, it's radical to decide you're not going to diet anymore. And that's one of the reasons I think a lot of women in particular hold back from doing that work because they're like, I don't know how to step away from this friend group. And that's one of the things, and we'll get into this in more detail in a bit, but I appreciate about your group program that you offer in that there you mentioned something about learning how to navigate those comments in social situations and learning the tools to set those boundaries to take care of yourself and especially around family. Like you said, you can't completely get rid of your family, although I will say I've had some clients that more so related to other trauma that they've been through, that they have just had to divorce themselves from their family because that's what their mental health needed. And through the support of their doctors and therapists, that's what they needed to be safe and to be healthy and to get on with their lives. So that is such a huge part of this work, I think, too, is just having that reckoning around the relationships that are in your life. I've even had clients realize that their workplace is not supportive of where they're trying to do with food and body, and they might need to pivot their career and they might need to do something else. And so all this work around intuitive eating and just getting in touch with what your own body needs can be really truly life changing because there can be a lot of things that shift in your life.
You learn so much about your environment when you change your mindset, as you were saying, like your work relationships. The workplace might be the most triggering place, and you don't realize it until now when you hear like the receptionist or somebody else talking about diets or how they're losing weight or how somebody gained weight. I think it's really awful how much we talk about other people's body changes as well. And if that environment's a problem for you, then you need to fix it or you need to change it. And I think you kind of brought up one other really good point with that is like sometimes, if there's trauma and stuff, we have to let go of family. But sometimes during this path, we realize that we kind of find a new path for us. And I think one thing that's always really important to remember is when you make those changes, you never know who else you may be positively influencing. So at your workplace, if you stop talking about dieting or if you say you're going to go get help, whatever it may be, there may be somebody else in that room who you don't even realize who is so thankful for you speaking up or for saying something. And I see this a lot at family events too, is if you feel comfortable to speak up or if you say that these diet conversations make you feel uncomfortable and you'd like to stop, somebody else in that room is probably really thankful that you did that too.
Absolutely. And it doesn't matter what age that person is, like you talk in your word, like trying to support moms so that those conversations that they're having, the little ears around them aren't absorbing those comments about food and body. But you're right, even adults, like we're subjected to hearing those conversations in workplace friend groups, social groups, even at our kids' schools, and that could still end up being triggering. So yeah, you're right. You never know who's listening and who you might positively influence, and maybe even start some new relationships based on the fact that you're doing this work or that the person's doing this work. And maybe someone else that hears that, they're like, oh, I started to learn about intuitive eating too. And I felt like I was the only one doing this. And so, a whole new relationship can blossom out of that. And I wanted to circle back along those lines to your sister. So how did then you notice her 4-year-old self, pinching her stomach in the mirror? How did you, when you had your mind shift then, how did that step in and help your relationship with your sister or help your sister's relationship with food and body? What did you do to try to help her and support her?
So I think at that point, so I was about teenager in high school, I was really focusing more on what I was doing in front of her. Unfortunately, as I would say, like I wish I could snap my fingers and everything was great, but it was definitely a process. So I became more aware of the comments I was making about food or my body in front of her. I became more aware of the actions I took, whether I was measuring something out or if I was reading a calorie label, whatever it may have been back then. I became more aware of everything I was doing and how it influenced her because I could see her doing the same thing. So kind of like like the same thing the way I help my clients. The first thing is awareness. So, what language am I using? What actions am I taking? And how can I kind of flip those around and learn more about yourself? Because actually, if you dive into the language you're using and the actions that you're making, you learn a lot about your own triggers or your own fears or the way you really feel about your body.
Yes, that awareness is so important. First, like we have to have the awareness and the reflection before we're going to make any changes with it. And I don't know if you see this with your time with clients, maybe your one-on-one clients, that sometimes we have to sit in that awareness and reflection space for a long time because there's a lot of reckoning that goes on when you're in that space. And coming to terms with, is this really what I want to be doing? And again, like gonna have to change the friend group, or oh, might have to change the work group, or personal relationship, intimate relationship, so sometimes it can take a while to sit in that reflection and awareness space, but you have to do that in order to move forward.
Yeah, I think we were in a course together and we learned a lot about the idea that you can make all these changes, but if you don't really dive into that kind of the core belief or that reflection and awareness space, then it's going to be really hard to maintain that long term. And the reflection and the awareness can be some of the hardest stuff that you do, but it's what helps you so much in the long run.
Right. It's what the light where the life changing comes from,
Yeah,
because it you come out as a different person on the other end of it. And so how old is your sister now?
she is 15 now.
Okay. And oh, so she's like getting into the high school. How is, and how grateful that, yeah, I'm sure that you are now is solid in this work that you do, and that you can really be having a positive influence on her. But how is she doing in navigating all of the high school body stuff?
So she's doing really well. I'm not going to take all the credit for it. I think what actually happened is we focused a lot on her environment. So I think I'm actually very proud. Hold on. I'm very proud of the work that I put in for myself to help her right now. She herself have not had any problems, knock on wood. But what we've noticed together and what I've helped her with is a lot of her friends have. So she'll see stuff her friends are doing. Like this summer, I think one of her friends started using an app to count calories. And we kind of had a conversation about it, not saying like this is bad and don't do it, more so the knowledge behind it, like how much time that probably takes her. And it's really upsetting that this friend can't go to an event without having to calculate it, and that her whole life is kind of on her phone. So instead of just being like black and white about things, we try to understand it. So actually, a lot of what we've done is really just learning about what her friends are doing right now, maintaining her habits regardless of what anyone else is doing. And I think kind of like one of the most beautiful things for me that happened recently is, and one of her friends reached out to me asking for help with something, obviously not to be like a client, but more so like an older sister kind of, what do I do now? So, and that kind of goes to say, as what we were saying before, is you never know who else you could be helping. So by kind of helping my sister and being a positive influence there, she's a positive influence for another person, and also a safe space for them to reach out and say, I need help. Because in her family, for example, the mother is very much a diet focused mother. And it's really hard when you're at that age too, when your body is changing and it becomes really scary.
Yeah, that ripple effect again. And I like that. I appreciate that you just brought up like when you're that age and your body is changing. And this is what really came into my mind when you were mentioning your experience of going to the pediatrician around about, 10 years old, which is about when our bodies are getting ready for puberty. And they're supposed to put on a boatload of weight in sometimes a year because you're getting ready for menstruation. And, just breaks my heart at how many girls have gotten that message around a large weight gain around that age period, and how that gets extrapolated into like, well, this, you're going to end up being, quote unquote, obese when you're older. I'm like, we don't know how the adult body is going to shape out, but it's supposed to gain a bunch of weight, anywhere from, I've heard, up to around 40 pounds sometimes is not unusual for a young girl to gain in a period of time before she grows in height, because the body's getting ready to make this major life shift into being a woman. And we do the same thing when we go into perimenopause and menopause. And so like as a culture, like we don't allow that a body is naturally supposed to do that.
No, and it's really, really tough. And I think for me too, like, yes, I gained a lot of weight that year. And it was like, if somebody back then had told me, like, it's okay, your body's changing and it's getting ready for the next period of your life, like, I would have thought that's really exciting. Like, look at my body evolving and changing. And the other thing is, like, it's right before a growth spurt too. Like, so you gain weight, but you also gain height, and nobody factors that in. Instead of what it's more like fear mongering. So I remember because they showed me the graph of like, here's how much weight you've gained, and then here, like, look what happened. And it becomes this blame game. And it's like, how can we change that environment around a young girl's changing body to look at how your body's evolving now, and also not putting so much stigma on what if I'm in a larger body? So what? Like, why can't we have that conversation and still understand I'm going to be healthy at any shape and size?
Yes. And being able to look at the big picture of the genetics, like, okay, maybe your adult body is going to be a larger body. What's wrong with that? You can still have a healthy, fulfilling life if that's what you want to do. And again, not required, but you can have that regardless of your size of your body. So, yeah, we don't talk about that enough. And as you and I talk about targeting the women and targeting the moms, but I think another layer too is targeting, pediatricians too, and saying like, can we just not with the and celebrate, like you said, celebrate what that weight jump up means to that girl, to that family. It means you're growing up, you're growing into an adult body, and just looking at it that way and celebrating, and how what a different world it would be.
Like, how different people's relationship with food would be. It would be like a celebration of your body, a celebration of food. One thing that I do for my clients sometimes who have younger children is I write letters for them for the pediatrician. And this is something people can do themselves, is write a letter. If you're working with a dietitian or someone, like I'm currently working with them, and I would not like weight spoken about. I don't want any numbers spoken about either. Or you can even let the pediatrician know about your own relationship with food and your body and how you don't want this for your kids. The other thing that I've noticed is I've had kind of an influx of people recently telling me about how going to the pediatrician after this pandemic year has been really triggering, because the topic of weight gain has come up a lot. For a lot of people this year, you were forced to stay at home. Maybe that challenged your relationship with food in your body. Maybe you experienced body changes and now you're being shamed for it. And I think it's really important that no matter what goes on at the pediatrician, maybe these comments have already been made and now you kind of need the help as to what to do, that you can still be the positive influence. You, as a parent, can talk to your child about these body changes and explain how it doesn't make them unworthy, how they can be healthy at every size, and how it's just a number. We put so much power into this number. And I think, especially after this year, it's gotten just 10 times worse.
Absolutely. I'm seeing that a lot in my clients too. And I'm getting ready to open the spring edition of my group coaching program. And it's springtime is challenging anyway because we're moving into wearing uh, skimpier clothes and swimsuits and all of that. And now it's on the tail end of coming out of isolation from a pandemic. And so there is so much fear around the, potential pandemic weight gain. And now we're moving into summertime clothing, and and diet culture is like lapping that up. They are like targeting left and right, like, ooh, should we play the quote unquote COVID-15 card today, or should we play the swimsuit beach body card today? It's so insidious.
You see it at gyms too now that things are opening back up. That's really what they're kind of prying on. And I think the other thing with it too is, like, if you actually step back and you think about it, all this messaging is about how you look to someone else. It's never about how you look and you feel in your body. And I think, like, if there's one challenge people could take on now, it's how can you accept yourself where you are right now? Because if you feel good in your body and you can accept yourself from within and you survive this pandemic, and that's the biggest win of all, then why does it matter what anyone else thinks? Or if you gain 10 pounds or if you lost 10 pounds, whatever it may be, how can you find this acceptance so that you, when you wear less clothes during summertime, you don't have so much anxiety around other people, what other people are thinking of you? And most of the time, people are so consumed with themselves that they aren't actually thinking about your body.
Yeah, I love how you said that. It was just beautifully said that those marketing claims are strictly directed towards people's appearance, and it's how people feel about people's appearance in order to make that industry money.
They're just trying to take money from you.
That's all it's ever about. It's just about the bottom line. I'm wondering along those lines if we can shift to talking about like what are some common themes you see in working with your clients and their relationship with food and body and the relationship with their daughters. Like what are some core things that you areas that you really need to do that mind shift work? What are some of the kind of the big sticking points?
So for most of my clients, they actually have kids under 4. So very much so like first kid or second kid, very young kids. And I think the first thing that I notice with them is mindset. So it's very much so good food versus bad food, all or nothing thinking, and just kind of like stuck in this place where their inner critic in their head, who's like the food police, is taking over. So if they want to be good all day, and then by the time night comes around and you put your child to sleep, it's like, here's the first time I've had to myself all day. I'm going to just relax. And it becomes taking out food. And then it's the, oh my gosh, I've done something so bad. I've ruined my day. You keep going, guilt, shame, and you start over again. For some people, you might relate to this on the weekday versus the weekend mindset. But either way, it's like there's constantly somebody in your head telling you whether you're good or you're bad. You feel like you can't really be present with your kids. I see this a lot. Like when they go to make maybe cookies or brownies, it's like I'm constantly thinking about, if I take this one lick of the batter, do I have to report the calories or points? Am I bad? Did I just ruin the day? And it's really this idea that you're just so consumed by these thoughts that you can't be present and enjoy the moment with your kids. And honestly, even in your own life and with yourself. So that's kind of like the first common theme that I see when I start working with clients.
So shifting that mindset around the morality of food and the morality of food and how that translate into their morality as a person or even as a parent too. I'm wondering if you guys have to really work through that too, of this idea of, well, but those foods aren't healthy foods. I don't want my kid eating unhealthy foods. How does that, if that conversation comes up for you, and how does that play out in your work?
Whenever I hear that come up, we talk about what is a healthy food. Like, what is this label you're holding on to? Because it is probably a food rule that either dates back to your history when you were a child and seeing what was in your household, or maybe some recent diet that you've been following. A lot of these guidelines that we have for our kids or that we try to embody in our home really date back to something else. And it's really important. We spend a lot of time just digging. What is that old memory that I have around that? And then how can I work to slowly break it? For a lot of my clients, it's the carbs. The idea of eating a piece of bread or keeping these trigger foods in the house. What do I do? Where did this stem from? How can we slowly dig through it? And how can we also add it back into your life? Because it's easier to embody this for your kids and to promote this for your kids if you can start to change those habits for yourself first.
Yes, and unpacking those beliefs. Where did you even learn those beliefs? And are they true? And I've had some clients that are wicked smart and they've read all the things and all the books, and they'll toss out books they've read left and right, and what about this and what about this, and so bringing it back to, again, their lived experience. Like, well, okay, that may have been what you read, but how does that affect you being able to relate to your kid and bake brownies with them or cookies with them or go on a road trip and pull over and just grab something to eat because you're hungry? How does that even validating what they've read and what they've heard and their beliefs, but always, like you said, bringing back, how does that affect your day-to-day relationships, though, relationship with the food and the relationship with your kid?
If it causes you more stress, then we have to work on breaking it. And that's kind of like the first thing that I step back and we talk about, how much of your headspace is consumed by these thoughts? And even maybe it's fears around your kid. Like, what if my kid gains weight? Or what if I feed this to my kid and they become addicted to this food? And step back and rephrase it and ask yourself, what does that mean to me? What is your fear around that food? Because a lot of times the fears that we have for our kids or the rules that we have around food have nothing to do with them, but rather yourself and your own food fears.
Absolutely. And how many generations you've learned that from, and have absorbed that from, even if it was, your immediate mom, but like you said, it could have been the grandmother, could have been the aunts that you were around, could have been all of them that you're around too. So that, I don't know if you find this in your work, but sometimes the unpacking those beliefs is kind of it's a long time period in the work together, because they have to wrap their brains around it, and also in a way that is not because if they had a positive relationship with the other women in their family, coming at it from a way like we're not shaming those women, like they didn't know what they didn't know, and they were trying to be well intending. But again, if that is causing you now stress in your day to day, and you stress for moving forward with your life and with your kiddo, then now it's time to have some reckoning and have some relearning done. But we're not relearning in the face of shaming the other women in your life.
Yeah. And I think, like, as you're saying too, like, nobody does these things to hurt another person. When you have these food rules and maybe you push them on your kids, it's not because you're trying to hurt them. It's because that's what you think's best. The way your parents or family members have, scared you about being in a larger body or had these diet rules was based on protecting you, because there's so much stigma around being in a larger body size and they think you'll be happier if you're smaller. Or these food rules that have been created, or maybe from your household as a child that you're still holding on to, your mom probably put out there out of love and protection rather than trying to harm you. So I think, like, a lot of times at first we might be angry with our family. How could they have done this to us? We play the blame game. But if we actually step back and we empathize and we have compassion, it's more like, I'm so sorry they were struggling so much with food in their body. I'm so sorry that they still go through this every single day. And instead, how can I learn how to unpack, as you say, and work through it and then apply this to my kids so they never feel this way?
Yes, so much unpacking, so much, like Bree says, that Brianna Campos, who we work together with, and on body image, like it's sitting in that suck of not just body image, but it sucks to sit in that reckoning and that rewiring of our brain. And like you said, all the emotions, the getting pissed at our family of origin and what we learned, but then, oh, swinging back over like, oh, they didn't know what they were doing and they were doing the best they can and they were doing it to protect me from fat phobia and weight stigma and all of that. Like, it's just, I think, to me, this is what's fascinating about doing this work. And what I find so rewarding about doing this work is because it's not, as a dietitian, it's not just showing someone a food pyramid or a plate or whatever model du jour that we're using and saying, well, here's how you eat, because that's beyond oversimplistic. There's just so much more multifaceted pieces to how we eat, why we eat, and the family connection and all of that. And I find that so rewarding to help people come to know and come to appreciate, but also come to relearn it in a different way for them and choose their own style and their own definition of health. It feels like a really rich experience to walk through that with someone.
Yeah, it really is. And I always say too, it's like, I don't care what you eat. I care about the why. Because if you can change your mindset and the why behind your food choices and, as dietitians, empower somebody to be able to make those choices without any inner critic or any food rule in the way, then you're going to go such a long, fulfilling life with being able to reduce that negative headspace and just really finally feel like the one in control. Because diets and eating disorders and negative food and body thoughts, they take that control away from you. It's a control mechanism. It's all outside sources. And it's, how can I empower myself? When you see a client all of a sudden be able to just like go out to an event, eat, move on, feel no guilt, or be able to serve their kids maybe something they could never keep in the house, like an Oreo, watch them enjoy it and move on. It's like the most empowering moment ever.
One of my clients said she kind of had this own aha moment, and it's exactly what you're just saying. She said, you know, I have control again now. And I used to think, like, even in doing the beginning work around, the beginning anti-diet work, she like, okay, I shouldn't be controlling my food and tracking and this and that. But when she kind of came, back around, she's like, no, I do have control, but I have control not because of what someone is telling me to control or some app or whatever is telling me to control. My body is just saying, I'm hungry for this. I'm not hungry for that. And watching it fluctuate from day to day and season to season and event to event and being able to let it go. And so coming back into control to those own intrinsic cues inside of you is so empowering.
You trust your body again and you get all that mental headspace back. And it's almost like, what can I do in my free time? And I know a lot of us have limited free time, but when like 50 or 75% of your brain space is consumed by diet thoughts and outside measures of control, whatever it may be, and you get all of it back, it's like, I have so much more I can do with my life. Maybe even your phone has more space too when you delete all those apps or whatever it may be, because it just consumes way too much.
So true. So tell us a little bit about you have one-on-one work that you do with people, but then you also have a signature concierge program. So tell us a little bit about how that works and kind of the model you use to help women.
Yeah, so that kind of concierge program is my one-on-one. I work with women who are really, maybe you're not even fully ready, but you kind of recognize the idea that I've been stuck in this diet cycle. You've seen this generation of dieting and you refuse to let your child feel the way you do right now. Maybe you've already seen an event of your child kind of mimicking something you do, and this uh-oh light went off. And this is really for that mom or that woman. It's a 3-month program, and a lot of people continue on after, but during that month we really, as you said, like, we dive into those like food rules and kind of the trauma in the different areas that's been going on there with food rules and dieting, and we break through all that noise. We learn how to finally nourish our body again with all foods without any feelings of guilt or shame or am I good or am I bad, and learn how to tune into your body signals again so that you can trust your body. Another piece of this program too is that we really focus on the body image piece. What are your own core beliefs that you have about your body, and how can you kind of rewire that thought process? Maybe even, I've done this with clients before. We're grieving, we're letting go of those clothes from another point in our time. For a lot of my clients, it's pre-pregnancy. We're at post-pregnancy. Those clothes don't fit. Maybe you keep them front and center in your closet as motivation to lose weight. And now it's, how can I grieve? How can I let go? How can I understand that these clothes once served me and now they don't anymore, and find clothes that feel really good in my body? And then kind of during our last portion of working together, we take all this and we figure out, how can we apply this in the household to create this really positive environment for my kids? How can I show them that they can enjoy all foods without making comments, and they have a beautiful body as their body changes and evolves, and really just create this environment in the home? And part of it too is handling the diet noise with friends and family, and learning how to speak up and set boundaries. And it's okay if you don't want to tell everybody what you're doing. That's your privacy, and that's totally fine. But how can we set those boundaries so that your precious mental headspace feels really good too?
That environmental piece I think is so key. And I'm just, as you were saying that, I was thinking back on my more professional experience, and I spent so much time working in environmental and sustainability aspects of food and nutrition, which can get orthorexic real quick if we're being honest. But so to me, that's always where my mind goes with environment, is like mother nature, environment. But you're right, when you're talking about that day to day of someone's environment and creating an environment that will help them foster a positive relationship with food and their body and movement. And I just love how you say that, because that is just, it's so key, and it gets missed a lot of the time. We're talking about behaviors, but sometimes those behaviors are happening because of the environmental triggers that they're around. So almost before we can adjust the behaviors, we have to adjust the environment first.
That's why it's so key to really focus on the language and the actions you're taking in your home. If you find yourself justifying your food choices, or you find yourself saying, take this bag away from me, I can't control myself, even those little things like your kids pick up on, like they hear things like, I can't be alone with this food or else I'm out of control. Or maybe you step on the scale and you get really upset by it. They're going to have this idea that every time I step on the scale, I'm going to be unhappy. Or it's just like they don't put the full picture together, but they start to pick up on these little cues that kind of add up. And it's not to say that you're doing anything wrong. It's just like, open your eyes a little bit and be like, what language and actions am I taking in the home that may be affecting this home environment that we're probably in more than ever right now too?
So true. Oh my gosh, yes. And the movement piece, I noticed that was another part of your program too, in that you work with a physiologist to help people find movement that works for them. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. So one of the things that I offer anyone who joins my program is a free consult with an exercise physiologist that I pay for them. I think a lot of times, especially post pregnancy and for moms, there's so much targeted marketing out there for like weight loss for moms and fitness weight loss. And from the clients that I see, a lot lot of times they may be obsessed with their step count. They're only doing workouts that burn the most calories instead of focusing on movement that feels good on their body. So what I try to help them do, I mean, I'm not a personal trainer, so that's why I outsource this, is I try to help them find movement that feels good if they're ready for that. Maybe it's going for a walk without obsessing over the step count. Maybe it's trying new exercise that feel really good for your body. And I want you to work with a professional who can really help you get there, because this is probably a new experience of feeling what feels good without thinking about the calorie burning or the sweat or whatever diet factor comes with exercise. A lot of times we don't even know what joyful movement feels like.
So true. I did the body positive, or if you, are you familiar with the body positive, the nonprofit that really focuses
Yeah.
actually a lot on kids, and teens and youth. And they have this beautiful meditation that we did as part of becoming Be Body Positive facilitators, of having people think about when was a time that you enjoyed moving your body and you didn't even, it wasn't even on your radar of what your body looked like or what it was burning or anything like that as you were doing the movement. And where were you? How were you moving your body? Were you alone? Were you with other people? How old were you? Like the meditation, like go has someone visualize that, all those aspects, and then come back and do the reflection of like, how did that feel to go back to that time of when you could freely move your body without an agenda and without fear of what you look like doing it? And oh my gosh, it was so impactful when we did it as a group of facilitators. I mean, so such an emotional experience for people. And because you're right, we do get so detached from, what does joyful movement even mean? Or am I doing a movement because it will change my body in this way? Or it's helping me earn my food, but I don't like it. It's a suffer fest to get through it. So,
It's like the have to versus want to mindset. A lot of times we're in that I have to exercise, especially when you're a diet person. You exercise to get back the calories to eat more. So it becomes a justification cycle. So a lot of times people, we actually kind of have to stop exercising to figure out what feels good for my body right now. And I love that activity that you did, because I feel like it's also a very emotional activity, because for some people it might be hard to think back to a time where movement felt really joyful and good. And, what was it like then? What was going on? Who was I with? I think that's really beautiful.
yeah, so impactful for sure. Well, I love all of the pieces of your program. I like how you're really hitting some really core pieces, but it sounds like you go into a lot of depth too, really, for 3 months. And then like you said, people can continue on afterwards. And then do you have people can do your group program and then they could transfer into one-on-one if they want to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I offer a group program about 3 times a year, and this is small group coaching, like 2 to 6 people max in a group, because I think it's really important that you're in a small community of women. So yes, people can, obviously they can apply for the group, and if they're a good fit, I'll put them in there. Or after working one-on-one, they can move to group, or they can go group to one-on-one, kind of whatever we feel fits best for you together based on where you are right now.
That I think the community aspect of group work is so foundational a lot in this work. Going back to just what we were saying too, around one of the biggest sticking points for women to do this is feeling like they're in no man's land because all these other women around them in their peer group, in their family group, whatever, are still focusing on diets. And so to come into a group to where they're learning together, they're going through some mind shift change together, and they can connect with each other and hear and other people's experiences, other women's experiences, because it's one thing for them to hear from you and I, here's what we know and both our experience, but here's our professional knowledge. It's so impactful to hear from other women. Oh yeah, I totally get that, I did that too. Or, oh hey, I did that but now I don't, I'm doing this, maybe, give this a try. Like having those ideas and brainstorms and recommendations coming from a different peer group within the group is awesome. I've seen so many great things come out of that.
Yeah, because I feel like the two most common phrases I hear all the time, am I the only one who feels this way or am I all alone? And I know this sounds crazy, but, and it's always like, this doesn't sound crazy. I wish you could hear the person who said the exact same thing. So group is really awesome in that aspect. And then you also have people who are more, excuse me, are more private and they want that one-on-one. And then that's like a great fit for them too. You know, it's whatever kind of empowers you and makes you feel the best right now.
Absolutely. So where can people find more about you, your work, and where you like to connect with people?
Yeah, so you can always go to my website. There's a lot of information there, which is method with two D's, nutrition.com. Or you can go to Instagram. I try to be active on there. The Instagram is gabikahn.rd. And just providing, I do like to provide as much support as possible, but that's where you can also learn a little bit more about me and my style.
Yeah, I appreciate your Instagram so much. I love your little post-it notes that you write out. And I love the simplicity of it, but straight to the point, very serving of who you're meant to serve and very supportive of the moms and caregivers really of just kids, of people that are going to be around kids. I love that. We'll put links below this video. If you're watching it on the blog post, we'll have links to where to find Gabi below this video. So thank you so much for being here, Gabi. I knew we were going to have a rich conversation, but this, it, it went beyond my expectations for sure. I'm just so grateful for the work that you're doing in this world and almost to have a partner in crime to stopping the cycle, like stopping that trickle down effect, because that just doesn't need to happen anymore. And if we can empower women to be the change and to make the stop for generations of girls to come, is just it's an honor to do this work with you for sure.
Absolutely. It's such an honor to be on here. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so excited to kind of share this with you.